a seat. Grab yourself a cup of joe and put up your feet. Let's talk about the latest news and all about true crime. We can make a difference if we put in the time. Good evening, come and find you a seat. Grab yourself a cup of joe and put up your feet. Let's talk about the latest news and all about true crime. We can make a difference if we put in the time. If we put in the time. Yeah. Good evening, come and find you a seat. Grab yourself a cup of joe and put up your feet. Let's talk about the latest news and all about true crime. We can make a difference if we put in the time. Good evening, good evening.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome into a very special episode of the Joe Schmo Show. I think that may be the first time I've ever said that in a row. Joe Schmo Show in a row. But I have been looking forward to this since July 25th. Come on up, Mike. July 25th was Lori Daybell's sentencing. And I didn't see you for the last couple of days of her second trial. And so I was just waiting, Mike, to ask you if you would come on the channel and just talk about your career, because it is so fascinating.
Well, hey, thank you for the invitation. And it was fascinating to get to know you and a number of people that we've become friends with since and through the Daybell trial. You know, it's an interesting little group of community that sort of now gels around a trial like that. And so it was fun to get to chat with you, and that was certainly an interesting trial to jump into. It'd been, I've been out of the biz for quite some time, but just in the last year have sat through two fascinating trials: Lori Daybell's and this guy named Samuel Baitman over in federal court here in Phoenix. Two fascinating cases, and so it was interesting to jump back into the biz and now see how people are covering stories. For me, this whole thing was an education, meeting you and some of the other folks who are podcasters who are really, the new face of information dissemination, if you will. And you guys are putting I think to a greater degree than the local news. So it was a fascinating experience for me.
That's really an interesting topic to just jump right into off the bat, because her first trial in April, which was for Charles Vallow's death.
Yeah.
I sat with the public, and I came in and sat outside on the steps at 5 o'clock in the morning, some days, 5:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock, whatever time it was that we needed to get a seat. Some days it was packed, like especially opening statements and closing statements, it was packed. Some days there were like 10, 15 extra seats for the public there. But the second trial, I was allowed to be a member of the media. And that was just
well, welcome aboard, buddy.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And it was an arbitrary decision by the public information officer for the court. He's just like, hey, I've seen you here every day, so you can go in either side. Go whichever way you want.
Vince, with the guy at court,
Yep.
Vincent. He's a great guy. I've known him for many years, and it was also interesting to get in touch with just the court personnel and the people, the characters who work down at the courts. You saw it. It really is a drama that sort of unfolds with a high pressure, high profile case like Lori Daybell. All the people coming in now, people covering it in various levels of the media. It's just it was sort of a fascinating shot of American justice, American media, true crime, all in one little courtroom here in Maricopa County for a couple of weeks.
It was fascinating. So her jury selection was the first jury selection that I've ever attended.
Yeah. That was fun. Yeah, early. We sat through both of those, and it was. They asked the questions you would expect. Lori, of course, acting as her own attorney, at moments did okay, at moments didn't do okay, at moments were hysterically bad. I don't think in any way, shape, or form the outcome of that trial was influenced by Lori being her own lawyer or not. That's the way it was going to play out in both of those cases, whether she was representing herself or someone else was. But I did think it added a level of sort of entertainment value, if I can be so crass, that I thought was, I enjoyed. And that's sort of why I went down. I wanted to watch her perform in front of the judge.
Oh, she did perform too.
Yeah, no doubt. And their relationship turned in. That was fun. That was good fun. And I thought the judge was a very dignified man and dealt with it pretty well most of the time. But boy, by the end of it, she hated him. It was clear.
And you could tell that I think you could tell that she was getting under his skin by the end of it.
I don't know how she could not have, but I thought, in terms of conducting a case, he knew he had to get through that. She wanted an expeditious trial. He gave it to her. They kept it going. It was moving. I think he conducted himself very well. I don't think there's going to be anything that they can appeal on that. But, the nice thing about having 5 life sentences, sitting in a little concrete cell for the rest of your life, Lori now knows just enough about lawyering that she's going to be appealing stuff long after you and I are covering this story. So, she's got something to do behind bars, but I think all of those convictions are going to hold up.
Yeah, he did a great job of protecting the record, if you will.
Yeah. He was in control of the court. She did her best to sort of derail it and I've seen some, I think we talked about this. I watched Warren Jeffs, the polygamous prophet, represent himself down in Texas about 12 years ago. And, an epic failure again. I mean, of course he was convicted, but it's just, it is amusing, I think, to see someone with the sort of hubris to think, I can represent myself in these matters and do better than anyone else. I have never seen it work out very well. And so, yeah, I thought it was very entertaining.
Yeah, and I was actually there on December 5th and December 6th, and it was pure coincidence at the time, and it led me to staying there for the rest of her trials.
Yeah.
But December 5th was her hearing for whether or not she was competent to help represent herself. And then December 6th was the hearing where he granted her the right to represent herself. So, I mean, she laid it all out on the line, like how much qualifications she had. And when
the interesting thing about her, she definitely is not stupid, and was articulate enough. There were moments when, in some ways, she wasn't an abject failure. I went in thinking that it was going to be just comic relief with her, and it wasn't. There were moments where she was competent, at least in my opinion. I don't know what you think, but
no, I think she actually had some good beginning thoughts on making some legal arguments.
Right.
But in the end, she could never land the plane. Like she never could bring that thought into a fruition of something legally substantial, which is why the second jury only deliberated about 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah, dude. They figured out seating arrangement. They spent more time figuring out who was sitting where than they did in deliberating. I don't think either of those juries were, too burdened by. I think it was easy for them. Whatever. I don't think it's a complicated case, and with all of the communications back and forth, it's not hard. There was lots of evidence, and Trina Kay, I thought, was a very competent and well prepared prosecutor. She took care of her business and didn't really get caught up in the Lori sideshow, and threw a pretty good, pitched a good case for the prosecution. And Lori was going to get what she got. I think 5 life sentences. But here we are, and we've had these dramas leading us to this point. Sort of inevitable, but all of them have been fascinating. And the 2 trials here in Maricopa County were very interesting.
Yeah. So when did you first land on Lori and Chad Daybell case?
My daughter and I, we've discussed, my daughter and I started doing our own little true crime podcast, and we were way late on Daybell. I can tell you, soon as the murder happened here and it got headlines here in Maricopa County, I don't know when it was. This would have been when they finally figured out that Charles's murder was, and when she got into the headlines here, I got contacted by 3 or 4 journalist friends of mine who wanted me to know, just because it had the Mormon link. The sort of weird, Mormon foundation. She was once LDS and sort of then jumped off and whatever. And because of my history covering that. So I can tell you, as soon as it broke here, a number of people contacted me, and I said, I don't know anything about this Daybell woman, and I've never heard of this guy, Chad Daybell. They're not part of the sort of Mormon fundamentalists that I'm familiar with. But so I was at least aware of it because a number of people were calling me, and then we sort of got sidetracked with other cases because it just so happened in that same time frame, cases that I had been on for a long time, like Warren Jeffs and the FLDS community and a revelation gathering up the children. And then this man that I mentioned earlier, Samuel Baitman, who was sort of a breakoff of the FLDS. And his trial has just made its way through federal court here. We got distracted by that really in the same time frame. So all that to say, my daughter and I started really covering this just when we realized it's going to come to Phoenix. And it sounds like a trial that would be sort of interesting to sit down on. You know it much better than I do. The whole saga in Idaho and everything. I know just from reading the headlines, to be honest with you.
So, we're not that far off actually on that aspect of it, but tell me what you think about them extraditing her to Phoenix when she already has life sentences in Idaho. Just to try her twice.
Yeah, and is it a big expenditure? Sure. Does the family of Charles Vallow want justice here? Sure. I mean, there's a million. Everybody's got a good argument. Should we have wasted the money because she's going to rot in basically a prison cell in Idaho? Does it make us feel better about things by sending a message you can't get away with it here in Maricopa County? Those are all points that people can argue, and you can feel one way or another about it.
All right. So this brings me to another point then. So as an investigative reporter who's been around the block for a few decades, and me as a brand new one, less than a year into the game, getting to know the families of the victims. So Kresha and I have gotten to know each other. Megan, so Kresha is Charles's niece.
Right.
Megan and I have gotten to know each other. She's Lori's cousin. I feel like they got a little more sense of justice in this, but
Sure.
As an investigative reporter, how do you distance yourself from that, or do you distance yourself from that?
No, I mean, it's part of the story. There are people who clearly saying that it was a big waste of money. Why did we have to spend all that money to fly her down here and put her through two? I mean, I've heard those arguments. You have too, and you can understand that. Talk to Charles's family, Kay, and some of those folks. Very, I don't know them well, but got to in that sort of pressure cooker setting. You do get to know them a little bit, and they wanted justice for their brother. He got murdered here. It was a horrible situation. Brandon got, it was terrifying what happened to that young man getting shot at. So, when you sit down and you see their family members in court, see what the trauma that, Lori and her minions inflicted on a whole bunch of people. Do they want justice? Sure. Is everybody going to be happy? Some people will be upset because they spent a lot of money prosecuting her. The family will feel like they got, maybe an ounce of justice out of the whole thing. So you're never going to reconcile those things. As a journalist, I don't think it's your role to reconcile them. It's to recognize they're being said, but let them say it, unless you got a big, strong opinion that you want to go. And if you think it was a waste of money, good. Then and I certainly had those early on. You hear about the story. I had those same feelings and thoughts, and I think everybody does. It does sort of change the complexion when you sit in a courtroom and you see the family of the murdered guy or the family of the young man who was very nearly murdered, and see, you get a sense that they want to hear this play out in some formal, and again, I'm not telling you one way or another, but you get those. I think just tell the truth and expose the truth, because people are saying both ways. The family wants justice. Maricopa County wants to send a message, and other people are saying, "What a waste of money! What a ridiculous waste of money!" And I don't think you're ever going to reconcile the people who feel that way.
I'll reconcile that right now, because Kresha and her brother Todd got to stand up and make a victim impact statement,
right.
And that was priceless.
Yeah,
like that was priceless for them.
Right. You don't want. I don't want. I would not want to deprive them of that moment. And that's what it required, getting a prosecution here. So, yeah, but I think that's an interesting part of the story.
It is, and it's
legacy,
right.
Controversy wherever she goes, and sort of scandal, and it's such a horrible story, and the victims, were. She and Chad are sort of psychoanalysis had been done of them, and but the victims seem to be such generally very nice people who didn't deserve certainly didn't deserve what happened to them.
Yeah, chaos wherever she goes. She left chaos wherever she went. Yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
So, boop boop boop.
Oh my goodness, it's all scary, isn't
it? I have not been able to put this book down, and I'll be honest, I haven't gotten through all 320 pages, whatever it is, since I got it, but I have not been able to put it down.
Well, you're kind to say. Thank you. My God bless you for saying that, my dear friend. It's not for everybody. It's sort of scattershot chaos, essays, and short stories, and in no particular order, but I think the chaos sort of reflected accurately the nature of my career.
And it's fascinating to me on another aspect, because you've kind of taken us through the true crime evolution that our society has gone through over the last 30, 40 years. I can remember, and I can point back to OJ being
right.
One of my first true crime stories that I was fascinated with. And I wanted to watch every minute of that trial and every minute of Marcia Clark screwing up the prosecution. Sorry, did I say that out loud? Screwing up the prosecution. And then the civil trial with him. And then you go to Lady Di. And there are just so many cases that you were so close to. How does that happen to one person?
Well, I think that it's marvelously lucky is the truth. I've been so fortunate throughout my career to sort of be at the wrong place at the right time. over and over again. And I'm a cops and robbers reporter, so in terms of covering these what has been sort of, I think, the evolution of American true crime stories, and OJ being a very significant moment in the broadcast, and of course what it did to the country. But then there have been other ones, and I've just been lucky to have been at the right place at the right place, the wrong time, right place, whatever, working for the right shows and getting dispatched to stories all over the world. And I just feel really lucky, pinch myself, because at heart I'm still just sort of a hyperactive little kid, and and an adrenaline junkie. So I found this career that paid me to go out and have adventures and go to wild places and meet extraordinary people. It's worked out really well for me.
So I know I said we're gonna like sit down and talk. You and I texted before we started this, and I said we're gonna sit down at the local watering hole and have a little chat. But now I'm going to be an attorney, and I'm going to have you present your CV, your curriculum vitae.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Where did you start? We got to start with your education.
Oh, I grew up in Salt Lake City, and went to high school, graduated in Salt Lake City, and then went away to college, and then went away to graduate school, and then got a job. It all runs together. It was a million years ago.
What did you get your degree in?
I left Salt Lake and I got a degree in anthropology.
Yeah. Whoa. Yeah. How does that lead to OJ and Lady Di?
Yes, and I think
Daybell.
I think it leads perfectly to being a crime reporter, and certainly in the context of the work I've done. I guess if there's one branch of my career that I think people know me best for is my coverage of the FLDS community and war on chefs. And I think in many ways the stories that I have covered of that is really sort of an anthropological study of a community, what was called an ethnography, a community that you could very well define that has boundaries, and you understand who the people are and how does it sustain itself. And I think the community along the Utah-Arizona border, known as Short Creek, I've done my sort of own, people would, I'm no expert at this, but I feel like the study of anthropology is the study of societies as sort of organic communities. How do they sustain themselves? And most of my reporting about the FLDS, I think, has sort of been enhanced by my study of anthropology. Long-winded. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think it's actually the study of anthropology has been very helpful in this telling of stories about people.
It definitely is, and it has definitely led you instinctively to some crazy stories and being on, like, how were you in Brentwood right after OJ?
Just lucky. I was working for the TV show.
That's not luck. Okay, you say lucky. That's not luck. That's like hustle. So the title of your book is The Story Hustler. That's hustle and instinct.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I still tell young reporters that they must, whatever you got going for you, the most important attribute or trait is fire in the belly. Having, an urge to go, a need to go and cover the story. Well, now you can be beautiful, you can be smart, you can be articulate. The most important attribute of a reporter is to have some fire in the belly, I think. But OJ is, that specific example. I was working for the TV show A Current Affair, the Flying Triangle, ka-chung, Maury Povich, that. And this was many years ago. And when the OJ case broke, I got a phone call. We're racing down the freeway towards Santa Monica to go pick up some story for A Current Affair. And one of those big cell phones, like a brick, rings in the crew car. I pick it up, and some guy screaming at me, "Get to Bundy, such and such address, OJ's ex-girlfriend or something, blah blah blah, the murders." We're on the freeway just by that exit. Pull off the exit, get up to Bundy, and there's a handful of cops and maybe 2 or 3 local reporters there, and the story, as they say, began to unfold. The 2 bodies were there, and we were among the first crews on the scene with the homicide of Ron Goldman and Nicole. And, within a couple of hours, OJ had gone to Chicago, and he's now winging his way back. And we hightail it down to the police station and ambush OJ as he's coming out of the cop shop. And the game is on. The story has begun.
So that's like early 90s, right? Early mid 90s, whatever it was.
Yeah. Late 90s, which
late 90s.
I could pick my book up and see I got a chapter all about. I got a chapter on that first day.
I've got it here too.
1990 something.
You know what? I have somebody in chat that wants to know about the flight of the fawns.
Oh yeah. Well, one of the most significant stories. There was a long period of time where we were doing stories with activists trying to get cops and law enforcement to take this issue of the child abuse and the underage marriages seriously. And the night the 2 young women, Fawn Broadbent and Fawn Holm, ran away, that story turned into one of the sort of lightning rod stories that had a life of its own and really came along at a point where we really started getting some traction, getting law enforcement and politicians in Arizona to do something about an issue that they had no desire to touch for many generations, and a lot of reasons of that. But it was it was a Sunday afternoon, just a short story. It was a Sunday afternoon. I get a phone call from my old friend Flora Jessup, one of the great heroes in this story, a woman who the changes that have been made and the incarceration of Warren. If it wasn't for Flora, I don't know if any of that would have happened. But so she calls me one Sunday afternoon, says, I got some girls who are running from the community and they need help. You want to go up with me? And we went up and did a midnight run and plucked these 2 girls out of Short Creek, out of Laverkin at the time, and brought them back here. And they didn't want to go back. And there were 2 16-year-old girls, and it cost the story. We immediately got the story on the air, talked to these girls, said why they were running, because Warren Jeffs was going to put them into marriages if they didn't. This was their contention, and it was a big damn deal. Those and brave, and I'm still in contact with some of the people involved in those stories, and they're dear friends of mine. These young women have gone on and really been role models.
And as long as you've been doing this, and as long ago as that was, it's still going on. We just had an FLDS missing children story.
Yeah. Well,
within the last month.
Yeah, right. Elizabeth Roundy, a lovely lady that we know very well up in Idaho, and she's just one of many people who have fought to get out of the FLDS community and have also then gotten their children out, only to have sort of FLDS relatives pull the kids back in, and these folks have, like Elizabeth, have fought so hard to get themselves out and then try to get their kids out. And it's a horrible story, and she's not the only person. 2 of her kids went missing just a little over a month ago. Last time we spoke to her, she it was still just desperate to find them. But the FLDS community has a lot of wealth and places they can hide these kids and squirrel them away. But the thing about it is, law enforcement needs to understand that every time a situation like this happens, it's not just some kid running away. It's orchestrated because Warren Jeffs has told his followers to gather up the children, and usually it means crossing state lines. So there's a myriad of reasons why law enforcement should take these things a lot more seriously, but unfortunately they don't. And that's just one of there's 2 main stories that have sort of bubbled up since in the last couple of years, the missing children that you're referring to, and then the trial of this guy named Samuel Baitman, who was sort of this wannabe prophet and who victimized.
He was the guy they pulled the truck over and there was like a trailer full of kids behind the truck, right?
Right. And and the problem with that is that's when that's when the world came to know that story. There were many of us, myself included, were well aware of Sam Baitman and trying to get law enforcement to take action long before that pullover in Flagstaff. And this is what we know have been very close to that story, because Sam Baitman came down to Phoenix one day and insisted on a meeting with me long before he got busted. And as soon as I had this meeting with Sam, I turned around, shot some pictures of him with these young women, and immediately turned it over to the FBI. And the FBI told me that they were going to get on it. And this was damn near a year before he got pulled over. I was just up in Colorado City talking to a number of other old friends of mine. We'd all gathered for a remembrance of a friend of ours who'd passed away up there. And they were sharing with me that they too were on to Sam Baitman long before he got busted. And he didn't really get busted. He blew himself up by getting pulled over. My contention, the point I want to make, is law enforcement was alerted to this guy and how bad he was and what was going on with these young girls long before he got himself pulled over and sort of forced the feds to take him seriously. But if he hadn't serendipitously gotten pulled over in Flagstaff that day, this might still be going on. And a number of us were just screaming bloody murder, and the feds never seemed to pick it up. Never seemed to take the tips and the leads very seriously.
Okay, so where?
And that's really an infuriating story for me. And
where do you go from an investigative reporter to turning things in to the FBI, to the feds, and hoping that they do something on it? Like I guess that's a mystery to me right now.
Oh, good, yeah. And you bring up. I think it's fascinating. I think it's an interesting dynamic, because I just sort of went through it. When I retired from television news in 2018, it's just coming up on 7 years. The story I didn't want to do anymore. I didn't want to do any more polygamous child abusers, false prophets who rape children. Spent my career covering these guys and helping bust most of them. And when I retired, this is the last thing I want to do. I need somebody else needs to go cover this story. That's my attitude. But then I suddenly, a couple of years into my retirement, I get 2 phone calls that change everything. One is from a family telling me that their daughter has just gone missing, like the stories you told me, because they'd been pulled back into the FLDS. They wanted my help. We were able to go find that child, thanks to some other people. And I got a phone call from this guy, none other than Sam Baitman himself, a year before anybody knew who this guy was. And he calls me out of the blue and he says, "God has instructed me to meet you, Mike Watkiss, and the Queen of England."
What?
Yeah, but and that was sort of I'm sitting on my porch late one night. I get a phone call. It's the same time frame when I'm getting these calls from people who, as children, are going missing, and now I'm getting this call from this guy named Samuel Baitman. I've written about this, posted a couple of photos of me and Sam together. But he calls me and he says that God has instructed him to meet Mike Watkiss and the Queen of England. And I'm flattered, I guess, that I'm included with the Queen.
Yeah, right. To be mentioned in the same breath as the Queen of England. I mean,
yeah. Well, and this was to bear in mind. This was it was right before, it was Christmas 2021, so it was a few months before the Queen had died. So and I'm saying, and I'm humoring him at this point. I'm about to tell him, "Look, dude, I'm retired." And I did. I said I could see from the area code. The call was from the Crick, and I'm thinking, I don't even want to talk to this guy. Ring. And finally, I answer it, and he says, "I know this is going to. My name is Samuel Baitman. I know this is going to sound strange, but God has instructed me, revealed to me, that I need to meet Mike Watkiss and the Queen of England." And what? And, the Queen's quite an elderly person, and why the hell do I want to meet you? And I asked him, do you follow Warren Jeffs? Oh, yes, yeah. Gave me very mixed messages. And at that point, I really didn't even want to talk to the guy. Again, I'm retired, and the last thing I want to do is talk to this bonehead who's going to preach to me about fundamentalist doctrine. But the fact that he's insisting, and over the course of the several phone calls where I tell him I never go to Colorado, oh, well, I'll call you. Maybe I'll be down in Phoenix. Try to push him off every way I can. I finally realized that I should get eyes on this guy because he's going to meet me whether I meet him. And I don't know if he's got. And Warren Jeffs, to my knowledge, still has a sort of an outstanding hit out on my head that he issued when he was down in Texas. So I'm thinking if this guy may be executing Warren's will, I don't know. But we finally do a meeting. I'm horrified. He shows up with 25 young women and girls, some carrying babies. It sets off every red flag I know of. I get my son, who's with me, to shoot some, and daughter-in-law shoot some video, get pictures of all the girls. And soon after a couple of minutes of meeting with him, I go back home and call the FBI and say, if you guys aren't investigating this cat, you sure should. You sure as shit should be. And I was on their ass for a couple of months, and I know there are other people who are feeding them same information about this guy, Samuel Baitman, who was just setting off red flags wherever he went. And nobody seemed to have any sense of urgency until he explodes himself with that pullover in Flagstaff.
Yeah. I've got that pulled up just for the people in our chat who may not be familiar with that. I've got that pullover.
Yeah, and I did a story for one of the local TV stations. It's called Sam Baitman, Mike Watkiss, and the Queen of England. And I give you some, dude, it was
oh my gosh,
it's hysterical in a way, but it's so aggravating because we've gotten to know a number of the young women who are the survivors of who spoke at his trial and have gone on with their life. But the abuse this guy inflicted on these poor young women was just horrible.
And you can tell when you watch this video, like even just like as the outside world watching this video, you can tell that there's something going on here that ain't quite right.
Ain't quite. If anybody who has any sort of knowledge about the subject and the culture and the sides, should have been blowing this thing up long before that pullover. And this guy was not only, it's a very bizarre story, and you're going to hear, I think, some cable shows try to do recaps of this story. And I don't know if they're going to get the story right, but Sam was really nutty. He went out of his way to get attention. He made one of his followers, a young man who'd made quite a bit of money in business, buy him 2 Bentleys. So Sam is driving around in not one, but 2 Bentleys in the dusty little town of Colorado City and Hilldale, just, again, setting off every red flag that he was abusing these children, and nobody seemed to get the guts to go do anything.
Including the FBI. The FBI.
Yeah, on multiple, and again, I know I contacted them immediately after my encounter with him here at a park in Phoenix, and then a couple of months later, when I was about ready to just go do a story on him and just blow him up. Just put it out there. And as I had done with many perps in the past, don't wait for law enforcement, go blow them up and make them public and put the spotlight on them, and then cops will follow. I wish I'd done that. Say that
one more time, because that is so impactful to me as somebody who's out there just like
my whole history has been, we started working with activists who were advocating for the young women who were being abused and some of the young women themselves. And we tracked the perps down and put them in the spotlight, dragged them out of their dark little corners and put them on television and waited for the cops to come get them. I mean, the whole history of that, it was the media and activists pushing for Warren Jeffs to get prosecuted and making it hot enough for him here in Arizona that he had to move to Texas, which was a horrible career move. And they busted his ass and put him in prison, But that didn't start with the initiative on the part of law enforcement. That was activists and a handful of reporters raising hell. And when Sam Baitman presented himself to me, I immediately turned this over to the FBI and said, you guys need to be doing something. I was led to believe that they were doing something, and months passed. I was about to do another. Finally, I just given up, and I got up to Colorado City and was preparing to do a story, one on the missing children of the we've spoken about, and one about Sam Baitman and his own little offshoots. Because there were really two stories that have come together in the last couple of years, and those are they. I was ready to do a story then. I called the FBI again. Oh, we'll get somebody out to take your video. We want to see it. Crickets. And then a couple of months more pass, and Sam gets pulled over at Flagstaff. Not because law enforcement is on his ass, because some cop just sees little fingers sticking out of a back. And if it hadn't been for that, and let me be clear about this, my hat's off to the law officers in Flagstaff that day. They did a terrific job. Once they realized there were kids in the back, they had no idea who Sam Baitman was. They didn't know that the FBI had been notified about him a dozen times before this. And the cops in Coconino County sheriffs did the right thing. They threw him in jail. But the feds weren't ready for it. They were embarrassed by that. The world then saw what was going on. It still took them a couple of weeks until they finally got around to busting the guy. My problem with the story is that the young women who are the victims, who are the survivors, are out and safe. That's the most important thing to this story. But we should learn something from how bad this was. And this was not a law enforcement success story. They stumbled their way into success. And thank God that these young women are as strong as they are, and they're doing fine, I think, today.
Yeah. That's such a repetitive theme that it's almost angering, because that's the same story in Kerr County, Texas. I was there a week and a half ago to cover the floods, and the public preparedness and warnings for the girls that were in cabins on the floodplain, and the ability for them to build cabins on the floodplain. And all of that stuff is like, it was a massive failure.
Yeah. I'm sure that was very dramatic to see that. Yeah.
It was. And it comes back for me personally, and which is why I love talking to you, is because it like, how did I run across this story? I just happened to come across it. How did I come across London Valdez disappearing on June 5th in Hooker, Oklahoma? I just happened to be driving through there like a week later. But what do I do with it now? What do I do with it now? I drove back to Kerr County so I could cover that memorial wall, but I don't know what to do with it after that.
It reminds me a little bit of they sent us to Hurricane Katrina, and there's an anniversary coming up for that. And boy, that we were down there, went down with a camera guy, and we spent a week covering that, sleeping in our car because there were no accommodations, and doing live shots out of a satellite truck with a young Anderson Cooper when he was the first, just emerging as the main guy at CNN. And we were the only people, really the only crews in Baton Rouge. It was, that, and I remember being so impacted by the destruction and the death that it was like when I finally got done with that assignment. I got back to an airport, and I was on my way home. My wife put my two young children on it, and I just broke down and sobbed like a baby. Could just having my two kids and seeing, this is what you've seen, the destruction and the death and these young people's lives lost down in those floods in Texas. And we saw much the same way when we were covering Hurricane Katrina down in the Gulf Coast. And it definitely leaves a scar, covering that stuff.
Yeah,
I can see it in your eyes. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So I guess the question is, what do we do with it after that? And
well, you tell the story. You're saying you're the journalist. You tell the story. You keep telling the story. then there'll be story. And you're right to go back, because that's the thing in our disposable society. That was a giant story, the Texas floods, and it dominated our news rightfully and now like it seems almost ancient history, and that's how fast the news cycles move, and that's unfortunate. So you want to do your job and feel good about it. Go back occasionally and remind people that this is still going on. There are people, and that's something you can do with your job.
Yeah, you and I've talked about that. Like we gotta keep covering it.
Well, and that's and if you want to make an impact on a story, journalists today, and all the throwaway news, you got to sort of stay with stories, and that's one thing that I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I've known it when I've gotten on a good story, and people would say, "Why do you spend so much time covering the FLDS and this?" Because it was right in front of me. I grew up around it, and I'm smart. I am smart enough to know a good story when it comes my way, and to hang on to it when it continues to be a good story. And that's, I think that's a good trajectory for most reporters. If you can find something you find interesting, stay on it.
So help most of the everyday people understand the difference between the FLDS and the LDS.
Yeah, well, the LDS is what I think most people would say the mainstream Mormon church, centered in Salt Lake City, Mormons. And the FLDS is a group that broke off many decades ago. They call the LDS is the Latter-day Saints. The FLDS is the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. And the mainstream Mormons really, I think, are disdainful of their fundamentalist cousins. They find them embarrassing and say they're very different. I mean, their theologies are much the same, but that's, I'm not a theologist. Theologian is the word I'm looking for, but I'm a crime reporter, and it's not their beliefs, it's the behavior. And the fact is that with the fundamentalist communities, there is the sort of chronic marrying of young people, and that's what it's the crimes committed against the young people, the women, the sort of abandonment of the boys. They're different. The mainstream Mormons, the LDS is what most folks refer to as the mainstream Mormons. FLDS is the community primarily down along the Utah-Arizona border, but they've now really scattered, and there are other fundamentalist groups that follow the same lifestyle. There's too much history and there's a lot to all of that story, a lot of different layers to that. I'm not hearing you.
There we go. How's that?
Good.
Better.
Good. Thank you.
So yeah. Warren Jeffs was FLDS.
Yeah, Warren Jeffs is the prophet of the FLDS community, and probably still is, and regarded as the prophet still by several thousand people that still follow him
from prison.
Yeah, he's been locked up. Warren will now be next year. It'll be 20 years since Warren was busted outside of Vegas by a heads-up highway patrolman named Eddie Dutchover. Eddie noticed this big Escalade cruising along and pulled it over and found Warren Jeffs in the back. And Warren has been locked up for nearly 20 years, incarcerated for life in Texas since 2011, I believe. And so, he's coming up on his 20th anniversary. But to my knowledge, he's still calling the shots.
For real? He's having communications with...
No, seems to have no problem getting out communications. We were discussing the missing children. The missing children, that woman who you're referencing, Elizabeth Rowdy, who reported 2 children missing just a couple of weeks ago. Again, she lost another child about a year ago, and a number of other families have had their kids sort of pulled back in after they had worked to get the kids out of the FLDS, and they've disappeared. It all came immediately after a revelation that Mr. Jeffs issued from prison, telling his followers that after a many-year hiatus of doing marriages, of having families, of having sex, he was going to start marriages again. He wanted to gather up the children. And so suddenly children go missing. This is not a circumstance. This is not an accident. The kids that you're talking about went missing following a revelation, as a result of a revelation from Warren Jeffs behind bars in Texas, where he still seems to call the shots and get his people to commit felonious behavior, trafficking, kidnapping children and taking them across state lines. That's sort of going on in the present.
And here's where there's not a difference between the FLDS and the LDS church, because both churches believe that they have a leader appointed by God who hears direct communications from God about what they do with church members, with the church, in direct revelation. Like the LDS believe that too. It's not just the FLDS. And I guess that's where Kresha and I we like to dive into that research, because if you believe that somebody can be standing before you as your church leader and give you divine inspiration now that contradicts something else that either makes sense or is against the law, whatever it is, like that's where the FLDS and the LDS like cross lines.
And you can have that discussion again. I'm not into the theology. I don't, I'm sort of.
I am. I was raised LDS, so I was raised LDS, so I'm going to go there.
You can say whatever you want. I don't care. I mean, I've come to sort of think that most religions are pretty squirrely, and the more devout people are to their religion, the more squirrely they are. But and people love to bag on the Mormons. I grew up LDS, but I love it when I get some other faith coming up and saying, oh, the Mormons are disdainfully saying how they're crazier than everybody else, and I ask them what their faith is, and then they tell me, and I often tell them, do you know the history of abuse in your church dates back decades, eons, centuries. These guys have been doing it for a couple of, maybe a century. They make, your church makes their abuses look like pikers. So again, you want to bag on the LDS church? That's all good for you.
I'm not bagging on it. No.
Again, I don't give a damn whether people worship hubcaps. I don't give a damn if they're genuflecting to tumbleweeds or praying to the clouds in the sky. I don't give a damn what they do. Believe whatever you want. Your behavior, you rape children, you're going to have me coming after you. You abandon your sons, throw them out on the streets of Salt Lake City after you've worked them since they were 8 years old. You're going to have me come after you. And that's been my attitude. I don't give a damn what any of these clowns believe. I care what they do in practice. And that's been the guiding light of my, and again, people, I just don't give a damn about it. I think most people's religious beliefs are squirrely.
I have the utmost respect for that.
The utmost respect for that. Yeah, and but it's a valid topic. It's just one I don't find much interest. I grew up.
Yeah, right. If you want to point out one or you want to point out another, there's always another after the one that you're pointing out. There's always another.
Yeah, pretty much.
High demand religion is a thing.
Yeah, but I find low demand religion. I have no interest, so I have very low demand.
All right, so I'm going to read some titles from the chapters in your book, and you have like 40 chapters in your book, and I love that. So
again, they're short.
And that's perfect. I gave your book to my son to read, and he's not done. He's not done reading it, so he's Gen
How old
Z,
is
right?
he? Is he of age? I think that you better not give it to a child.
He's like 26-ish.
Good. It would get us both in trouble, I think.
No, he's 26, 27. But he was like, man, I love the way that he writes this. He's coming at me like we're just having a conversation.
One critique said it was like having a beer at a bar with the author. So and that was probably as good as I've heard, as good a critique as I've gotten. So I'll take that.
So OJ,
yeah,
covered OJ. Yeah, Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah, it was in the movie Dumb and Dumber. It was because I was on a current affair. They needed a reporter from a current affair. Went
You
to.
were also in a Michael Jackson video, right?
I'm told that I've been told that there's something. Yeah, I think it's something that was produced after. Yeah, I've seen the clip where I'm in it with Michael Jackson. I don't remember. I didn't get paid for it, and I don't know how I ended up there. So,
How did you
yes.
not get paid for that? That's a crime in itself.
Probably.
You should be investigating that.
If I was to go after all the people that have stolen stuff from me over the years, it was, it's really not worth it. Sometimes if they spell the name right, it's all that matters.
Right. That's all you can hope for, right?
Yeah.
The Salt Flats.
When I was a young kid, the toughest job I ever had was laying railroad ties along the Salt Flats outside of Salt Lake City. That's where they do the world speed records. It's this big, flat, straight, salty, ocean. And there's a railroad that goes past. And when I was a kid, I worked out there. One of my buddy's dad sort of ran this railroad, and he got his job. Hardest job I've ever had, laying ties on the Salt Flats. For the Salt Lake, Garfield, and Western Railroad. Yeah. Toughest men I've ever met working on that job.
Wow. And the railroad has to be straight. Like they're bringing stuff through on that railroad.
Oh, yeah. We did not want a derailment on our shift. That's for sure.
Bodies in the lake.
Yeah, we went we were covering a story about an elderly man who went missing, and his fancy RV had been taken, and the theory was he was thrown into his body was deposited in Lake Shasta in Northern California. We went out looking for the body, did not find the body, but learned some interesting things. It's apparently a perfect place to dispose of a body because it's a reservoir. There are big giant trees at the bottom of it, and if you throw a body in, first sinks, gets waterlogged and sinks, and then the gases start bringing it up. But in Lake Shasta, there's so many big trees, the bodies get caught up in the trees. And it was just one of those macabre little moments, sitting out on a police boat looking for a body, and this cop's telling me this story, and I thought, we're never going to find this body in this lake.
Do cops not know the best way to dispose of bodies?
Oh, he seemed to know this was a good way. Yeah, I mean, but it was his beat. I'm sure they pulled bodies out of the trees before, but it was just one of those little interesting moments, covering it in a beautiful place like Lake Shasta. And the interesting thing was when we were up shooting this story, because we went out with a cop, and then we had a little time off. We had an afternoon, so we rented a boat to go water skiing. But all of us were a little nervous, knowing that there were probably these tentacled fish, just below us. Water skiing sort of changed the whole atmosphere of our trip. But sometimes you know too much about a place.
Right? Yeah. Polygamy Diaries.
That was a series of reports that I did for a TV station in Phoenix when I worked there, and we came to the body of work. It became to be known as sort of the Polygamy Diaries, and there's a little almost dispatches throughout the book. They're not real chapters; they're more paragraphs just to break things up. But they're moments in time that along the Texas trial of Warren Jeffs, or when I thought that some of my colleagues in the media were screwing the story up, which happened, and didn't help matters. I don't think didn't help the cause. So there's some of this is rants and raves, essays and exorcisms, my own personal getting the demons out of my soul. So that's sort of what the book is full of.
It is, and that's why I can't put it down. It's here's a good one. Taking a punch on national television.
Yeah, the reason I got a job in Phoenix, I spent 22 years at a TV station in Phoenix. And the reason I came to Phoenix is because I got punched on TV one night. And it can be great for your career taking a punch on camera. I can just tell for all you young reporters out there, it can be great. I was after it was back in L.A. Current Affair had got the TV show I'd worked for many years had gone off the air. It tanked. And so I'm suddenly without a job in LA, and I get some of my friends end up at a TV show called Hard Copy, which you may remember. And they offered me a freelance gig. You want to just go pick up some money. My wife was about to have a baby. I needed a job. I was down and out in Los Angeles, and it sucked. So I took a job as a freelancer to do a pickup interview for the TV show Hard Copy. I'm based in LA. They send me to Salt Lake. They get my hometown. Turns out that there's a guy on television selling some elixir late at night to cure everything from cancer to hangnails. And they were going to do a story busting this guy on television, but they needed somebody to ambush him, which is a little facet of television that I've always been very good at. So I ambushed this guy in the parking lot, and he starts throwing punches at me. So instead of just handing the tape over and saying, here's the guy being questioned by our producer, suddenly there's our producer, Mike Watkiss, confronts this guy. They do a big series of ads for it. I don't even work for Hard Copy, but they run this on television. And it was a big to-do on Hard Copy. And the day after it ran, I'm sitting down in Paramount's office, Paramount Studios office in L.A., and the phone rings and some guy says, hey, we saw you get punched on TV last night. That was great. Come work for us. And long and the short of it is, it was the news director from Phoenix. My wife and I wanted to get out of LA. I wanted to get out of the tabloid business. And suddenly there it was. And all I had to do was take a slug on television. So it's sort of a funny story, but it shows you how the serendipitous nature of television. I came to Phoenix, changed the course, raised my family here. It was great. It was a good move. I never would have thought to come here if some guy hadn't punched me and a news director called me out of the blue and said, hey, that was great. Come work for us.
So what's your favorite thing about Phoenix and your least favorite thing about Phoenix?
Oh, it's, you catch me in the middle of summer like this. Too damn
right.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's pretty easy. I love Phoenix. I love the people. Watched the town, in the 28 years I've been here. Watched it change a lot. But I raised my family here and have a lot of great friends. And some of the year, the temperature is great. But this time of year, not so much.
Yeah, I spent the winter there last winter, like starting with Lori's hearings in December 5th, 6th, like December, January, February. It's amazing. I love the weather there.
Yeah. Well, that's when they have all the football tournaments and all the golf tournaments, and then they broadcast those to America, and everybody says, "Look how great it is there." So they all want to move here. My recommendation is come June, July, August, May, September. It's just, if you still like it, then you're going to be great here.
Right? Yeah, you'll figure it out. If you can figure out June, July, August in Phoenix,
it's pretty hot. It's been pretty hot the last couple of days here.
All right. So Trace on the Case is one of my OGs, and she wants to know about El Dorado.
Oh, well, it's a little town. That's where, Warren Jeffs, people started doing stories about when Warren Jeffs began taking power of the FLDS community from his elderly father in the late 90s. And when he died, officially taking power, there were ominous signs. Warren pulled all the kids out of public schools. Teachers were telling me that younger and younger girls were disappearing from classrooms because Warren was marrying, the ominous signs of Warren. The community's been there for 100 years. Warren definitely took a bad situation and made it a lot worse. And there were telltale signs early on. And, we started doing stories on this. And ultimately, it led to one young woman coming out named Ruth Stubbs. I just was up in Colorado City, spent some time with Ruth and her family now. And this was now 25-something years ago. But Ruth had been given by Warren Jeffs as a third wife when she was a teenage girl to a cop up there, and the cop got prosecuted, Rod Holm, because activists brought the case to us. Ruth talked to us, and we raised hell. And her husband got prosecuted. And the prosecution of this polygamous cop named Rodney Holm was, again, a very significant moment, because it showed, and the cop was prosecuted for taking this underage bride that was given to him by Warren Jeffs. The cop was sent to jail, given a slap on the wrist, but he was convicted. And Warren Jeffs realized at that moment, if they can come after a cop and get a conviction on a marriage that I performed, it's a matter of time before they come after me. That's when he started buying up properties and bought up the property. Literally the week that cop got convicted here in Arizona. In Utah, forgive me, in St. George, Utah. That week is the week that Warren went out and started buying up these compounds, including that place in El Dorado, that big compound that has the white temple on it. And Warren realized that if Arizona and Utah are starting to make things hot and busting a cop, they're going to come after me. I need places to go. So we went out and bought a number of properties, including that place down in Texas. And that's how they got hooked up down in El Dorado. They were hoping they'd fly under the radar screen. They told the local folks that it was going to be a corporate hunting retreat. But when they immediately started building these like barracks size, these, dormitory size apartment complexes on this property and this big white temple, people knew that it wasn't a hunting retreat. And Warren realized that in a place like Colorado City, as isolated as it was, police could still get in there. He was hoping to go down on this compound and put up walls to keep everybody out and keep girls from running. But eventually, the Texas Rangers got a search warrant and went in and found a treasure trove of evidence and prosecuted Warren and put him in prison. But it all started down in that little town in El Dorado, Texas. We spent a lot of time down there. I know the newspaper editor and his wife down there. We've got friends down there, but spent a lot of time as that community was growing. And for a number of years, it sort of just developed this giant temple and this compound house. Scared the hell out of these folks. What are they doing? They're bringing all these people in, probably outvote us, and there were a lot of people upset down there.
So how do you find a story like that? Like, how do you go down that path of that story? Like,
well, we were all over Warren by that point. We were covering the trial that led him to go run down there, and one of my friend Flora Jessup, who was one of the terrific allies in this story, an activist, a woman who'd grown up in that community, and who got out and wanted to fight to protect her little brothers and sisters, protect them from going through what she'd done. Flora was one of the great heroes in this story, and she got intel that they were moving down there, and we went down with her, and shot video, and she alerted the town folks. Stood out in front of the local courthouse. She says, "I don't think they're coming. I think they're here." And it was a great one. Again, a very dramatic moment in sort of the progress and tracking Warren down, holding people accountable, and as these guys were, and Warren had all kinds of resources. That's why he could run, and was on the run, and in an beautiful Escalade, and thousands of dollars in it. He was a very well-heeled fugitive with all these people sending him money. So it was a very interesting effort to try to track him down.
But on your side of it, just instinctively following that story, like knowing, like we've got him and we're going to keep following him.
Yep. Well, like I said, I'm not the smartest reporter, but I know a good story when I got one, and I don't let it go.
That's why the name of your book is The Story Hustler.
The Hustler. The Hustler.
The Hustler. Yeah. I actually had somebody in chat the other day who follows me a little bit on social media, and I have no social media presence. I have like 3,400 subscribers, which I greatly appreciate, and thank you to each and every one of you. Absolutely. But I'm not like Lauren Matthias from Hidden True Crime. I don't have 250,000. I'm where I'm at, and I've got to where I'm at, and I appreciate every one of them.
Right.
But one of them the other day said, Joe Schmo has hustle. And I was like, he didn't know anything about your book and about our interview tonight. And I was like, that's like one of the best compliments that I could ever get.
Totally. Well, and you just telling me the story that you sort of took it on yourself to go down to Texas and cover that story. That's not an easy story to cover. And, that's good hustle. Joe, I'd concur with that. You're the person who made that comment. You got hustle. And I've always been one of those kind of reporters, old school reporters. I don't want to Zoom call somebody. I want to go talk to them face to face. I want to go see where they're at in their environment. And, so good on you that you're willing to take it upon yourself to go cover a real story like the Texas floods.
Well, and thank you so much for joining me today and for being willing to jump on my channel. I appreciate it so much.
Hey, anytime, buddy. It was fun to get to know you, and I hope I see you again. We'll cross paths in another big court case.
We will. Absolutely. All right. We've got the link to your book in chat, and we'll put the link to your channel in chat too.
Appreciate it, Joe. Best of luck
Mike.
to you, and thanks for the invitation. It was fun.
All right. Thank you so much. Mike Watkiss. We'll catch you on the other side.
Good evening. Come and find you a seat. Grab yourself a cup of joe and put up your feet. Let's talk about the latest news and all about true crime. We can make a difference if we put in the time. Good evening. Come and find you a seat. Grab yourself a cup of joe and put up your feet. Let's talk about the latest news and all about true crime. We can make a difference if we put in the time. If we put in the time. Good evening. Come and find you a seat. Grab yourself a cup of joe and put up your feet. Let's talk about the latest news and all about true crime.